This week I thought I'd have another go at painting an impressionist portrait. I used another picture from Unsplash, and the reference is of a girl with blonde hair and a grin on her face, which I thought was a really nice picture, but not too complicated. There's no freckles or birthmarks or anything too difficult to do. My first attempt was not great, so I decided to have a sketch to try and see if I could see the proportions a bit better. So looking at my portrait, there's a lot of work that needs doing, and to be honest, I think I'm just going to start over. I'm going to paint over all of this. I mean, look at it. But I tried something here. Basically, ChatGPT critiqued my previous painting and then gave me an assignment to improve my painting, and that was to do the same portrait in 2 hours, then in 45 minutes, then in 20 minutes. This was my 2-hour version, which took less than 2 hours because, to be honest, I think I was rushing because I had it in mind. I only had 2 hours to do it. That assignment is just way too advanced for me right now, so I'm just going to take my time and I'm going to have another go at this. I paint over my portrait with a mix of white, cerulean and black, but it's actually a little bit too much on the blue side. I want it to be closer to the reference, so I go over it again with a slightly lighter shade of the colour, and I dry each layer with my hairdryer to speed up the process a bit. Next, I make a grid. This is a little controversial. I remember the first time I used a grid method to try and translate a reference onto a canvas. I was told that was cheating, but I was doing some research and I believe it's Van Gogh that used a grid to help him with his plein air paintings. If it's good enough for Van Gogh, I mean, you know. So I actually found an app that is made for artists that will put a grid over your reference photo, and it asks what size surface you're working on and then what size you want to break up the grid into, and I kind of guesstimated a little bit and thankfully it turned out okay. And I cropped it to be the right proportions for my canvas paper, and I already see a massive difference. I think that sketching it onto the canvas paper with a brush with that grid there to help me has made a big difference. And the hair needs a bit of work, but I just wanted to block in those main colours and shapes, and I think it already looks so much better than my first attempt. So I'm looking forward to day 3. After watching a few YouTube videos on impressionist portraiture, I decided to tackle my painting again. I'm using a bigger brush than I'm naturally inclined to today to try and get those nice thick brushstrokes that are so common in impressionist paintings. But even so, this piece is ending up more and more blended as I go along. Painting over the pencil marks is quite tricky. They show through even after a couple of coats, so I think if I make a grid again, I'll use watercolour pencils instead, so they disappear with the paint application. I painted in some eyelashes, but I paint over these as they were too thick. I am stood up facing the canvas paper head on, so I'm not sure why both the faces I've painted are elongated. I'll try and fix it when I come back to this painting. I'm wondering if the quality of my paints is affecting the outcome as well, but a bad workman always blames his tools. I wanted to blur the lines between the hair and the background, so I used a sponge, but maybe I need to try tissue instead. I'm not sure. Overall, this is looking better than my first attempt for sure, but it still shows that my skill level is quite low still. I photographed my painting and made a collage of it next to the reference photo, turned it black and white, and I noticed that the values are quite off. It's mostly mid-tones in my painting, not to mention I haven't got that impressionist sort of brushstroke I was going for, so I used the same app to make a grid with smaller 5x5 squares, drew it over the painting, and now I'm going in with much more confident, thick brushstrokes. The only downside is the sun was starting to set, so the light is a lot cooler where I paint, and I couldn't see the colours quite as well as I could earlier in the day. As I go along, it looks like I'm ruining the painting a little bit, and I do fear that might be the case, but I'm going to look at it again tomorrow in daylight and see what it looks like. But I do think I've got a greater range of values now than I did when it was a lot more blended and smoothed out. Skip ahead if you've heard this story before, but there's a tale of either a pottery class, a photography class, or a painting class where the teacher split his students into two groups. In one group, he told them that they were going to be marked on their absolute best piece and to make the best piece they could for the length of the term. And the other group were told to make as many paintings as possible, or pieces of pottery or photographs. The moral of the story is that the group that made the greatest amount of work actually improved better than the group that was only making this one standout piece and had all the time in the world to work on it. So I do realise that at some point I'm going to have to move on and just keep adding to the amount of paintings that I make and stop fiddling with one painting a week. Day 4, and I'm continuing in the same vein as last night, so I'm just going in with much thicker brushstrokes. This left side I ruined a little bit. It's a bit too red and I don't manage to get the colours right on it. But overall, the painterly thick brushstroke effect is coming over much better. I tried to increase the contrast. You can see where it's not quite right. It's a little bit too blended and not blended enough in some places. And I had to move the mouth up a little bit. Her chin is actually a bit longer than I originally thought. I go in with making the eye sockets a bit darker so that the eyes have got a bit more depth to them. And I'm trying to render the lips as best as I can. Going in with the eyebrows and the detail there, trying to make them as individual as I can, because on the left it's got a little bit more lightness than the right. The right side's a little bit darker. And then I'm going in with the paint for the hair. I think I got the colours quite good on the hair, but the texture needs work, definitely needs improvement. But as I go along, I'm getting more and more pleased with the outcome. I feel like during days 2 and 3, I just put in way too much effort with blending, overblended it, overworked it, and wound up with more of a realism style painting than I have today. I'm much happier with the outcome of this. Of course, there's mistakes, there's things that need work, but it's heading in the direction that I'm after so much more. You can see there's more contrast, the lights and the shadows are more evident. And here's the progress after 4 days. I think it's really good. Compared to the original photo, it's not an exact likeness, but it's much better than my first attempt.